Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the Liberal Democrats conference closes today, but fear not. You've got Labour's to look forward to next week. Ahead of their gathering in Brighton, the party's governing body, the National Executive Committee, is meeting today to thrash out the agenda. As you'd expect, it's not without controversy, with many MPs complaining some of the proposals will increase the left's influence on the party. We can speak to Ian Watson, who's outside Labour headquarters. Ian Watson, what's being discussed and proposed?
It looks like it's going to be a marathon meeting of the National Executive Committee. It could go on for 6 hours. Jeremy Corbyn went in. He's presenting his own paper on reviewing the Labour Party's structures. But I think the things that you're suggesting MPs are worried about are definitely on the agenda, and they're definitely worried. I think, in essence, what's happening is there'll be another attempt to shift power away from MPs and towards the party leadership and towards party members. To go into some of the rather less interesting detail of this, as you probably know, it currently takes 15% of MPs and MEPs to put a leadership candidate on a ballot for members to decide. And there was a worry on the left that that threshold was too high. When the time comes, when Jeremy Corbyn stands down, for them to get another left-wing successor. So they wanted the threshold reduced to 5%. What's been discussed in there at the moment is a compromise proposal to reduce that threshold to 10%, around 28 Labour MPs and MEPs, and they would in future nominate who was on the ballot. But I'm told that would just be an interim move. And as part of this wider review that Jeremy Corbyn is presenting, it could be possible that threshold will be reduced further and shift power even further towards the left-wing members and towards the leadership in a year's time. So they diffuse around this year's Labour Party conference, but they simply may delay it until next year's party conference. Right.
I mean, how important are these debates around thresholds for leadership nominations, increasing the size of Labour's ruling National Executive, who are meeting at the moment? Does this, in your mind, indicate a big shift to the left, to one wing of the party?
In short, it does. I think what we're seeing isn't a revolutionary shift. Some people around Jeremy Corbyn are saying he's got a historic opportunity to effectively reshape the party in his own image, to have, for example, the mandatory reselection of Labour MPs. Well, he's steering clear of that, I'm told, in his review, which is quite important. That's seen as totemic by some people on the left. They also think that they should effectively put the power to choose a successor entirely, some of them, in the hands of the members. He isn't quite doing that either, but we are seeing incremental shifts towards the left, reducing bit by bit the power of MPs. That's certainly the case, and as you were suggesting, there's also a move to change the composition of Labour's ruling National Executive Committee. That would in future therefore include more constituency representatives. They tend to come from an increasingly left-wing membership. That would in turn load the dice, if you like, in Jeremy Corbyn's favour and give him more power over the party machine.
All right, only 5 more hours to go, Ian Watson, before you get any result from those meetings. Thank you very much. Now, listening to that is a man who's had the dubious honour of having both served Tony Blair and Jeremy Corbyn, having them both as boss, former Justice Secretary Lord Faulkner. Welcome to the Daily Politics.
Thank you.
Do you support this move to reduce the threshold for support in order to become a leadership contender?
Well, I think all of this needs to be looked at. The Labour Party has changed dramatically over the last 2 years. When Tony Blair became the leader of the Labour Party, he changed a lot of the rules. I think it's absolutely legitimate to look at the rules and see how they need to be changed.
Why?
Because we're now a 600,000 member mass membership party, where the drive and the energy in the party comes from these new members to a very large extent. They quite legitimately want to see the party more democratised, and that seems a fair consideration from our point of view.
But why is it a priority at the moment? I mean, arguably, Jeremy Corbyn is secure in his position as leader of the Labour Party. I mean, he's been through more contests than predecessors. Why look, yeah, which is a marathon in itself, but why look at these sorts of, if you like, tinkering round the edges, or you want to obviously bring more democracy, you say, to the party, when actually he's fine where he is?
Well, he is fine where he is. I can see a point that says we should be much more focused on Brexit Brexit and other issues like that.
And the Conservatives.
And the Conservatives, absolutely. But I think it's quite legitimate, as Ian was referring to start a review to see how the party needs to change. And I think it's sensible to have a year in which we discuss that.
Right. So why are so many of your parliamentary colleagues nervous about it and do see it as a move to the left, which they think is not a good idea?
Well, I think some of them feel what you've just put to me, namely this is not the time to do it. Others see it as part of a factional struggle between, as it were, the right and the left.
Is it not?
It's not entirely a factional struggle. I think a lot of it is about reflecting a new sort of politics. And you can't see how, for example, the Tories are doing at the moment and not think you need a more democratised party. Let me give you an example. Yeah. We introduced the £12 person who could vote in a leadership election. That was before we had a 5 times increase in the number of members. Is that still appropriate? Take another example. How do we strike the balance properly between Scotland, the regions, London, in the way that our party is run? Take another example. To what extent should party members be more involved, for example, in the selection of the shadow cabinet? All these things seem legitimate to me.
Well, except it looks like a power grab, it seems, to some of your colleagues. And I ask again, if he's so secure in his position, Jeremy Corbyn, none of this would be at all necessary. He's got to where he is now on the basis of the existing system. So surely you can understand why people view this then as an opportunity to try and shift and move the party in a certain tribal direction.
Well, I think the right course in relation to this is to consider over time, in a measured way, what changes are needed, because change is definitely needed.
And is it change like constituency parties in Brighton and Bristol West who have passed motions calling for changes that would make it easier for party members to deselect sitting MPs like Peter Kyle and Thangham Debonair? Is that a good change?
That's not a good change. I think MPs have got to feel secure. I think MPs have got to be focused on what's going on in Parliament. I would be strongly against any change in the reselection rules, and I understand Ian to be saying, I haven't seen the documents, he is saying that's not under consideration.
And you don't think it ever should be?
Well, I don't think it should be at the moment. I don't think it ever should be. I mean, I am very keen that members of Parliament, because we are a parliamentary democracy with the Labour Party formed to win seats, they should be focused on seeing the back of the Tories at the moment.
Right. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is consolidating his power within his own party and will then, of course, as they see it, one more heave and they kick you out. William Hague says it's not that far away.
Charlie was the great and distinguished sort of side rider with Tony Blair and led and supported the modernisation of the Labour Party. I mean, I can't imagine you're saying this with a straight face, because we know that in the Labour Party, moderate Labour MPs, new Labour seems a thing of the past. This is a very, very clear putsch by the hard left. It's Len McCluskey, and moderate Labour MPs are being threatened with deselection. I'm amazed, Charlie, that you don't see what's happening, which is a once great party is being radically yanked back to the left by your old foes, the old hard left. And I'm amazed that you're not, as a distinguished Democrat in Parliament, standing firmer against what everyone else, I think, can see, including Labour MPs.
So if you can't beat them, you join them?
That is not right. I think you cannot see what's happened to the Labour Party over the last 2 years, becoming a mass party, where the energy and the drive, particularly among young people, is from the new members, and say, sorry, we're going to go on exactly as before. When Tony became leader of the Labour Party, the first thing he did was to propose a change in the constitution.
Because he wanted to defeat the left that he felt had actually kept the Labour Party out of power. And now it's the opposite, and that's what Jeremy Corbyn is.
You see all of these changes as being left or right factional
Well,
stuff.
I think
that's not,
people within your own party feel that.
Some people do. But I think the right course is to reflect a change in parts of the country. And if you go on looking at it entirely as a cabal of people at the top, and that applies just as much to the current leadership as to the past, then that will not resonate with people who are interested in politics.
All right, just quickly, should Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, who's obviously been electorally very successful, should he be given a platform to speak at conference?
Yeah, of course he should be. He should have an opportunity.
But he's been prevented from doing
so. I don't know the detail of that, but he should obviously have an opportunity to speak at the conference.
So should they rethink that, Labour?
Well, I don't know what the plan is, but I would be quite surprised if neither he nor Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester, the two biggest cities in our country, didn't get an opportunity to speak at the conference.
Thank you very much. Charlie Faulkner.
Jeremy Corbyn secured a major victory after Labour's ruling executive approved a series of rule changes, including lowering the parliamentary threshold for nominating a leader of the Labour Party from 15% of MPs and MEPs to just 10%. The change has been in the air, but the agreement, 1 week before the leaders' conference speech in Brighton, tips the balance of power further away from MPs and towards those who are his firm supporters. It means essentially that in the event of a future leadership election, it will be easier for a left-wing candidate to get on the ballot. Well, Chris Williamson, the MP for Derby North and Shadow Fire Minister, joins us, and Matt Pound from Labour First is here with me campaigning against those changes. Thank you both. Matt, I'm going to start with you. This is a move towards democracy, towards giving more of the party more of a say. How can you possibly contest that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things about the proposed rule change. So the first one is that, OK, it's welcome that it's not 5%, and it's gone to 10%. Originally,
which was what John McDonnell was advocating.
Exactly. Well, it was the original proposed rule change from last year. That would have meant that we could have had a potential contest between 19 candidates. Now it's just down to 9. I say it's only down to 9, but I still think a contest between 9 Labour MPs would be completely ridiculous, as due to the voting system at the moment. That means that people could be electing the Labour Party on the 7th, 8th or 9th preference out of 9 candidates.
Is that really what worries you, or is it that you fear this allows more Corbyn-style leaders to go forward?
Well, I don't make any bones about the fact that I think that the MPs should be more involved in the process of selecting the leader. I think that there's a very obvious reason why that works, and ultimately the MPs are the people who have to work with the leader every day, and I think they should be given
Chris Williamson, doesn't that make total sense, that actually you want the MPs to be working well with the leader, you don't want to be shut out the process?
Well, I think the important thing to say here that this is a huge victory for democracy if the conference agrees these recommendations that have been made by the National Executive today. And I think what is perhaps more significant even than the method of electing the leader is the democracy review that will be embarked upon now to look at how we can involve this mass movement now in the development of policy. It is a huge weapon that we have at our disposal now. The party membership has almost tripled in the last 2 years since Jeremy Corbyn became the leader. So clearly he's reaching out.
Matt's concerns were that you now have potentially 9 different candidates, quite a lot, and you could get there on the 8th or 9th preference because it's almost impossible to reach that 50% majority on the first round vote. Doesn't that worry you as a sort of chaos of electoral logic?
Well, it doesn't worry me, no, because democracy is an important thing, and with a mass movement which is the Labour Party now, I think it's essential that we enable all shades of opinion within the party to be represented in an election, leadership election process, from the right of the party right the way through to the common sense socialist wing of the Labour Party.
But if Jeremy Corbyn did it without these changes, doesn't that suggest that you didn't really need to do this at all?
Well, there's a range of recommendations which have been made, and I think it's really important that we don't have a situation where MPs could act as gatekeepers and prevent a candidate who would potentially be popular with the wider membership from actually getting onto the ballot paper. That would lead to huge frustrations and would be, I think, damaging to the party's electoral prospects. And that's the important thing, because what we want to do is make sure we get into power to change people's lives and change the country.
And I agree with a lot of that. I agree that we should be having members getting more involved in campaigning, etc. Me and Chris will have worked with campaigners from Labour First, from Progress, from Momentum, all the way through the general election campaign. The party was incredibly united, but what we're seeing today, coming out of the leader's office, is not a report into how we harness members into becoming a campaigning force. It's how do we fiddle around with the rules in order to consolidate power to the left. And I just think that at this point, what is the point in having a review like that, which then attacks, which just causes the Labour Party to be completely focused on itself and not those they want to serve.
We will be keeping a close eye on it next week at conference. Thank you both very much indeed. Thanks.